Hey everyone, today I want to talk about the 1997 miniseries, The Shining. It turns 25 this year, so it feels like a good time to talk about it. And this was directed by Mick Garris, starring Steven Weber and Rebecca De Mornay as Jack and Wendy. And you have two kids playing Danny, which I'll talk a little more about that shortly. But this is something that aired in 3 parts, so it runs about 4.5 hours, if I'm not mistaken, because each one was about 2 hours, and you got about an hour and a half out of that once you take out all the commercials. And it was certainly an event, if you will. And a lot of the TV miniseries for Stephen King have sort of been these 2 to 3 night events. It's not like it is now where we have more of a limited series and you get sort of these 8 to 10 episode seasons of something and then it's just done. So there was a bit of a difference back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s with some of these TV miniseries. And this came out, 17 years after Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, so there was a good amount of time in between the two different adaptations, and frankly, it is a little harder to call Kubrick's an adaptation because it does stray so far from the source material, but the location and some of the ways the characters interact with each other are fairly similar to the source material in Kubrick's version, but this one definitely follows things much more closely. Jack Torrance isn't, sort of seen as this crazy person right from the start. He is more in control at the start of this, and then you see how the Overlook is sort of changing him over time. And because we have 4.5 hours of this, you get a lot more time to see these characters go through their evolutions. You sort of see what's happening with Wendy and Danny a little more in depth. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Kubrick's The Shining, but I think this one is definitely way more true to the source material. It just so happens that I don't like it quite as much, and it's not to say that it's bad and not worth watching at all. I think anyone who is a fan of The Shining should definitely watch Kubrick's movie and then watch this TV miniseries. And if you're not a reader, that's fine. But you can see that there are big differences in the way that Jack's story in particular is told. And, this one, they actually got to film it at the Stanley Hotel, which was the inspiration for the story. Stephen King was on set, and they had a story that fit more, not only because it was the actual location that inspired the story, but because they had the time that they needed and wanted to be able to shoot something that was 4.5 hours at the hotel. And I was actually just listening to Postmortem, which is Mick Garris's podcast, and he had on Steven Weber, Bill Curso, and his wife, Cynthia Garris, who makes appearances in a lot of his stuff, especially the King stuff. I think she cameos in almost every single one, if not every single one. So that's a little fun thing there. And if you want to listen to that, I will have a link to it in the show description, so be sure to check that out. But, overall, I think this is a fun little adaptation. I think it kind of grows on you after you sit with it a little more because of the way I had been doing my Stephen King podcast, Chat Cemetery. I blew through a lot of things, whether it was the books or, some of these longer TV things. And now that I've had time to sit with them, I think The Shining is probably one that I would be willing to revisit once I have the time, because like I said, it's a little long. It's one of those things where maybe you want to try and binge it all in one day, which you can. It's only 4.5 hours, but I think kind of experiencing it the way the audience originally did would be cool, which is not what I did. I definitely binged it in one day. So, maybe just do each of the 3 sections one night for 3 nights in a row, and then sort of get that original experience with sort of these cliffhangers. And I think that could be a fun thing to do in the future. And maybe I will have to do another podcast episode having watched it that way. But I don't think it's one of those adaptations that is so bad that I couldn't recommend it. And with it being the 25th anniversary of it, now is a pretty good time to go check it out if you haven't. So I don't want to give too much away for anyone who hasn't watched it, but 25 years, that is quite some time. And, we've had two different Shining adaptations, and I think that both are definitely worth watching. So, I think Mick Garris has had a chance to do a lot of fun stuff as far as Stephen King adaptations go. They're never necessarily my favorites, but I think they're all worth watching. He's done stuff like Riding the Bullet, which is a lot of fun. If you haven't seen that one, definitely check that out too. But I'll have to do maybe a dive specifically into all of the Stephen King stuff that Mick Garris has done. So if that's something that would interest you, let me know in the comments and I will be sure to put it on the list. But I know I've been a little slow with getting videos out here, so I just wanted to quickly talk about that and wish it a happy 25th birthday. And that is all I have for you all today. So thank you for watching. I will see you next time.